In my mind, there's two kind of ideological debates playing out in the Democratic Party. And one is this socialism debate. And we've seen that play out right here in New York City. And we've seen some of the polling trends, including Gallup, 66% of Democrats have a favorable view of socialism. And I'm wondering what your response is to that and how you'll handle it on the trail.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's kind of just become a label and sometimes name calling, where the really important thing is to figure out what candidates actually stand for. What I'm finding is that even though we're a big tent and different Democrats sometimes have different answers, we're asking the same question, and I think it's the right question, which is, how do we make life more affordable in this country? You know, this president took office promising that he was going to make life more affordable on day one. He said grocery prices would go down. They've gone up. Energy prices are up while he's killing utility projects that would create more energy generation. Obviously, we're really in a painful place as a country right now on healthcare, where a big issue in the midterms will be, why did so many congressional Republicans vote to cut Medicaid while they were giving tax cuts to some of the wealthiest Americans?
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and Fox and Friends are flipping out. And it's not because Pete Buttigieg came on to argue in good faith. It's because the original BS Barbie, Kayleigh McEnany, tried to bait him with culture war nonsense, framing Democrats as socialists while putting their orange buffoon on an absolute pedestal.
But you did mention some of these issues playing out, and one of them is the issue of biological men in women's sports.
I think approaching an issue like that, the most important thing is to take everyone seriously. This is going to be different in different cases, right? Middle school is not the same thing as the Olympics. Chess is not the same thing as weightlifting, which is why I think these are decisions that are best not made by politicians. But I also have to tell you, I would be surprised if this is a top 3 or even a top 10 voter issue in the midterms this year. I know that millions and millions of dollars came from Republican campaigns to put this issue front and center. They might feel that temptation again, even though I think that effort largely fell flat when they tried to change the subject to this from affordability in the elections in late 2025. But to me, at a time when, again, you got energy bills through the roof, the president has failed to do the things he specifically promised to do, like cut healthcare prices or premiums or cut grocery prices, and at a time when we have these shocking events in Minnesota.
Leave it to Pete. He didn't take the bait. He flipped the script and handed them their ass on a silver platter. On their own damn network, too. McEnany clearly thought she was going to control the narrative, but it didn't quite work out the way that she planned.
I do want to ask you about foreign policy. We've seen Maduro, who is now in custody here in New York City. He will be on trial.
Look, there's a lot of dictators around the world that I don't like. Maduro's one of them. That doesn't mean that the U.S. should use force to overthrow them one by one. Anytime we're talking about using force, and I say this as somebody who was sent into a war on the orders of an American president, the bar has to be higher. It has to be in the core security interest of this country, and there has to be no alternative. And I just don't see any evidence of that. You know, the rationale that the administration gave was that this was about drug trafficking, but if we're really serious about that, you know, we have yet to hear an answer from the White House on why the President Trump, pardoned the president of Honduras, the ex-president who was convicted in an American courtroom of bringing in, I think, 400, I can't even remember how many millions of tons of cocaine, of billions of individual doses of cocaine into the United States. How did this criminal get a pardon from President Trump? Did he contribute to the Ballroom Project? Did he buy some of that cryptocurrency and make the Trump family wealthier? Why are these many fraudsters getting those pardons? And I think the pardon power, whether we're talking about the people who were convicted of beating up cops on January 6th, or whether we're talking about the ex-president of Honduras, should be a much bigger story in this country.
And this is what actually scares the hell out of Republicans, when you step out of their box and confront them with logic instead of nonsense. And you could see it in McEnany's expression. From the moment she started, where she's confident, to the exact moment where that stupid smirk gets slapped right off of her face. Her eyes widen, her mouth parts just a little. That's the moment. The oh realization. I just stepped in it, didn't I? And boy, oh, did she. And what makes all of this so damn infuriating is a sheer insult to our intelligence. They actually think we believe this BS. Every single day, Republicans and their media mouthpieces run this state-run propaganda telling us that everything's wonderful, that we're living in Donald Trump's golden age of prosperity, and that we should all be grateful and thankful to our dear leader for it. Because remember what Trump actually ran on: lowering grocery prices like eggs, ending all wars, and ushering in this so-called golden age. That was the pitch, and it was a lie. A straight-up scam to get elected. Instead of relief, what people actually got were cuts. Seniors getting squeezed, Medicaid put on the chopping block, USAID gutted with real consequences that literally kill children overseas. And the same crowd now pushing anti-vax nonsense that puts people's lives at risk here at home. And the cruel joke is who they're selling this to. People barely scraping by, people drowning on bills, people living in deep red states on welfare, waving Trump flags in their trailer parks and sending their last dollars to a billionaire who sits on a golden toilet and wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. That's the fantasy Fox and Friends pushes. That's the cult logic they enforce every single day. And at a certain point, it starts to feel like a sick fulfillment of Nikita Khrushchev's vision about destroying America from within. And that's exactly why when Pete Buttigieg steps in and asks one simple real-world question, how do we make life more affordable for everyday people? That's when the cracks in the dam start to show and the entire MAGA narrative goes off of the rails. What Buttigieg did in that moment wasn't just rhetorical skill. It was honesty crashing through propaganda. He didn't pretend things were perfect. He didn't sell fairy tales about a booming economy or a golden age. He talked about how people are actually living in this country. Families stretched thin. Seniors worried about health care. Workers watching prices climb while wages lag behind. He reminded everyone that culture wars don't pay rent, slogans don't lower grocery bills, and Fox News talking points don't make life affordable. That's why his question of affordability hit so hard, because truth is a threat to a movement built entirely on lies. And the moment reality enters the conversation, the MAGA house of cards starts to wobble. The absolute hardest part of the political climate we're living in right now is realizing just how many people around us aren't merely confused or misinformed. They're outright cruel and evil, not just regurgitating conspiracy theories about aliens and fluoride, but blatantly out here, especially on social media, enjoying and relishing the suffering of other human beings. They cheer it, they meme it, they celebrate it. They laugh when seniors lose health care, when immigrants are dehumanized, when children die overseas, when people can't afford groceries or medicine, when American citizens are gunned down in our own streets. And that cruelty, that dark underbelly of humanity, isn't accidental. It's been cultivated, rewarded, and normalized by this entire MAGA ecosystem. Turns out MAGA was the problem all along. They were the groomers, the deep state, the cabal of Pizzagate predators that Republicans used to bait to enrage the cult members. But now they're stuck with the reality that they elected one of those shitbags president. And they're not a damn thing that they can do except come up with excuses and repeat BS logic like Fox and Katie McEnany are constantly spewing. And that's why moments like this matter. Because when Pete Buttigieg refuses the lies, refuses the framing, and forces a simple, real-life question back into the conversation, it doesn't just expose the propaganda. It exposes the moral rot and the contempt that Trump and his enablers have for the American people. And at some point, this country has to decide whether we're going to keep rewarding cruelty or whether we're finally going to stand up, the way Buttigieg just showed us how, for basic human dignity again. And that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.